William Hill is rated A by SBR. Find out why by clicking on their logo.
Hi, welcome to SBR Forum Videos. I'm Peter Loshak. We are continuing our regular NBA Conference update show with Jordan Sharp. It's the All-Star break right now. We just got finished discussing the Eastern Conference. Now we're going to take a look at prospects for the Western Conference for the second half of the season. Jordan, thanks for being back with us.
Pete, as always, thank you for having me.
All right, let's jump right in. Start out with the Rockets, right? The Rockets kind of like closed on a huge run. They won their last 7 games in a row leading up to the break. They covered 5 of those games. You think the Rockets are going to be a team to bet on in the second half?
The Rockets I'm a little weary of right now. I still think just because of how deep and how good the balanced Western Conference is, it's going to be very hard for them to sustain anything both straight up or against the spread. Dwight Howard, though, has been playing out of this world right now. He's starting to look like the Dwight Howard we saw before he started having some of those back issues and before he went to LA and that whole debacle last year. But if he can continue his strain of success, it's possible they continue their good run against the spread. But like I said, I still look at them as only about the 4th or 5th best team in the Western Conference right now. They're probably just looking at taking advantage of some teams that were a little tired heading into the stretch here to the All-Star break. But the Rockets, like I said, I don't think that they are somebody you really need to be actively tailing at this point in time. They just really haven't had that longer string of success like other teams that we've been talking about from the East, say the Raptors or so, that we really can look at as a team that has had prolonged success. It's just not enough to convince me right now.
Well, now let's take a look at 2 teams from the West that both went on extended bad ATS runs to close out the first half. Let's start with the Golden State Warriors, right? 5-10-1 against the spread in their last 16 games. You think that's indicative of how they'll be against the spread in the second half?
You know, the Warriors are probably at least one of the disappointments of the Western Conference right now. And yes, I think you can continue to fade them until further notice. I mean, they're besides Steph Curry, they really don't have and haven't really developed that second dominant scorer next to him that they absolutely need to have. Klay Thompson can't shoot on the road. He only can really score when he's playing at home. Andre Iguodala, as good as he has been after that injury, he had some hamstring injury and has really derailed him in the second half. And I don't think he's himself. Andrew Bogut's starting to get banged up. David Lee is David Lee. I mean, he's still going to give you points and rebounds, but he doesn't give you much on the defensive end, which this team really needs as well. So the Warriors just not a team I'm really looking at right now to somehow turn around their recent woes against the spread and become a team that you're going to want to tail right now. I think they're overvalued in most cases, and I think they'll continue to look that way towards the second half.
And then the second team I want to talk about is the Spurs. For the first time in a long time, the Spurs have been a clearly good bad bet. In recent weeks, they're 5-11 against the spread over the last 16 games. You know, normally they're a very reliable machine, but do you think in the second half they're actually going to be a good fade?
You know, that's a good question, and I kind of tossed this back and forth. But when you look at it, I think that it's just been because of their injuries that they've been so overvalued recently, and it's just a surprise from all of us because, as you know, I mean, the Spurs have just had a decade of dominance, straight up and against the spread in most cases. So the Spurs dipping against the spread significantly in the second half is where it's going to be very profitable to fade them. I'm not going to go that far out on a limb because I think that is actually a little bit of a stretch. I think once they get a little healthier, I think the All-Star break came at the perfect time for them. They should get some of their guys back. Kawhi Leonard, who's actually kind of the glue of that team, should be back somewhere close to after the All-Star break. And I think it's then, once they get a couple of those guys back, Manu as well should be making his way back here within the next 3 or 4 weeks. I think then you'll be able to see them as a little bit more of an undervalued team like they have been so recently. I think, though, if they aren't healthy directly after the All-Star break and are still playing with kind of a patchwork lineup, I think you could consider them as a fade. But right now, I think that's only a very short-term trend that just might continue a little bit past the All-Star break, but I don't think it's going to be far once they get healthy again.
All right, and then what can you tell us about the rest of the Western Conference? Which team that we haven't mentioned do you think might be a good bet against the spread in the second half?
So I have some teams that aren't currently in the playoffs picture right now in the Western Conference. I think you have to take a look out for. Obviously, we've seen the Los Angeles Lakers continue to be a pretty solid bet against the spread despite how bad they've been hurt. Kind of the anti-Spurs right now. They were overvalued earlier last year. Now people are looking at them as a joke, and they've actually been pretty solid against the spread recently. they're a team that could get healthy again and possibly have a good stretch run. Now, it remains to be seen of when Kobe will come back. He's supposed to address the media on Sunday during the All-Star festivities, so I think we might get a quote from him about when that could possibly be. But up until then, I think the Lakers could probably continue to be an undervalued bet. Also, I mentioned last week the Memphis Grizzlies. They've had a bit of misfortune recently with Marc Gasol re-aggravating his injury. If that's not anything too serious, I'm still holding firm on them as a team, like I said from last week, that I think will continue being a solid bet against the spread into the second half as healthy. They've been the number one defense since he came back, but now him injured again, like I said, it's kind of a question mark. And the Sacramento Kings have actually been a pretty solid bet. And I think at home in certain situations, especially as underdogs, they're a little bit undervalued. When playing at home, I really like the Sacramento Kings in certain situations. But outside of that, the two teams I'm really taking a look at right now are the Grizzlies and the Lakers to continue being a pretty solid bet, ATS.
Okay, Jordan Sharp, some things to think about in the Western Conference for the second half. Thanks so much, Jordan.